Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of her. Oh, hey, you guys have torches now. Maybe you didn't hear me right. I didn't say I disliked her, I said I didn't like her. The informed but incomplete opinion I have of her isn't as flattering as it is for others. I know people love this girl to pieces. I'm trying to find out why. Nicole and Billy kind of steal the show in the intro. We get a comment alluding to military experience, and that's about it until the room goes boom. The Cunning Hairs are our introduction to the world of ZZZ, and Anby is our introduction to the mechanics. She gives us the shoes we wear through the first few combat encounters, but she doesn't inject quite as much substance to the sequence as her peers do. All the way up to their reunion at random play, everything just kinda happens to Anby. The first thing she does after landing in the hollow is start an audio log, recording her reaction to the event she's about to undertake under the assumption that she isn't going to make it out. In my Cunning Hairs breakdown, I made a point that they each represented modes of persuasion, and in Anby's case being the ethos, her tendency towards references to records bog her actual character down and paint her as the quirky movie girl. The first glimpse into her character being so dour is fine, great even. It shows me some professionalism and level-headedness that I know ahead of time is going to make her a great foil to Billy once they come back together. It's just that once they're back together, Billy becomes the straight man. Now, I'm not saying I dislike Subversion. I love it, and I promise I'm not trying to make a trend of that sort of iffy talk. I think it does wonders for Billy's character that he's the one to grab Anby by the arm and tell her to slow down in the face of unmeasured danger, especially considering how the rest of the scene with Doulahan goes, with Billy demonstrating lots of the admiral qualities that are forced to underlie his character for the rest of the chapter after Nicole's back in the picture and takes the helm. The game introduces Billy as the lovable goofball, shows him at his worst, shows him at his best, and then lets him be himself, having shown us the peaks and valleys we should expect and expect to be pushed by the story going forward. Anby doesn't get any of that. In the intro, she is the character things happen to advance the plot, and most of those things are Billy's fault. It makes her seem like a subordinate, or an amateur. At worst, she feels like a prop to show us all the different faces of everyone's favorite gunslinging robot, but regardless, it doesn't develop her. It doesn't feel like it does. That problem sadly carries over into the actual meat of the chapter, too. Not for a lack of screen time, but all of her time in frame is spent in backs and forths with Billy, taking orders from Nicole or bickering with Nekomata. Just take it one step at a time. These productions are supposed to be easy for us, remember? Right. So, the next bit of anything I clock as characterization is the professional meeting in an alley, and it doesn't even come from her. You also have little things like the R255 green light joke, which I wave because anyone could have said that, and her biting Billy's hand in a blind attempt to try and cheer Nicole up with nonsense at a stressful time. I'm all for little absurdities, especially when they're spun to give a character a bit of awkward, good-hearted charm, but that sort of charm is window dressing. That's my strongbox is such a strong little splash of character for everyone but her, because being good at fighting isn't a character trait. Okay, that's not true, but work with me. It only enhances a sense of capability. Up to this point, all we have in regards to Anby's character is that she's capable and obsessed with movies. I'm really trying to not sound cynical here. It doesn't get better after the actual plot takes off either. She spends so much time doubting Nekomata. In just the recordings I have, I counted 14 instances I'd feel comfortable calling substantial. 5 of them are spent bickering with Nekomata, 5 of them are spent on gags, 1 of them is dedicated to Anby looking cool, and 2 positively contribute to her character. The first one is right here. And as much as I like it, it lacks weight. This conviction to help people in need and go against the government is a great hook. I'm just not happy about it taking 7 mainline story chapters for that hook to be delivered on. But I digress. The second is also probably foreshadowing, with Anby being the one to extend the offer for Nekomata to join the Cunning Hairs. But that's more of a characterization of the group and the way they do things than a point in Anby's favor specifically. I'm sure there's a possibility that I'm inadvertently cherry picking, but the idea here is the problem with incomplete pictures, so I think it's kinda apt, even though I'm pretty sure that isn't the case. But Cats Lost and Found is the story of the Cunning Hairs, and instead of telling a story alongside her teammates, Anby supports in favor of setting up a story to tell. See Grace, Ellen, Qingyi, and the other Agent Commission stories for other cases in the same camp. And I'm not going to act like I don't see that she's getting one of her own, or that we don't have characters from her past showing up as S ranks, but as we are, with what we have, with what I have, staring Chapter 5 dead in the eyes, I'm not nearly as impressed as I feel like I should be with her. There's just something that feels so wrong about calling a sweeping fan favorite the weak link. I know it's probably just a lack of context, but I can't let that be an excuse. Even with an ensemble cast that rotates as frequently as ZZZ's does, you need to make sure everyone has a chance to shine and sink their mitts into our brain during scenes everyone will experience. The model this game uses is giving the characters who aren't fleshed out so much their own side stories to pad that out, and that's a whole other can of worms. One you're going to open? One I'm going to open. Look, that's the problem with optional content, especially optional content that takes place in the nebulous downtime between chapters. The stories these characters involve themselves in for us to enjoy can't have stakes. There isn't any tension or pressure to make diamonds from the coals. They're isolated chapters and nothing of the norm can change by the time we're done. Both the character and the player have to be able to move on from the optional content as if nothing ever happened for the sake of continuity. But worst of all, and I'm going to say this with my chest, the characters cannot develop in any meaningful way. They can only be developed. Context is a fantastic tool for encouraging change, but as a tool of characterization on its own, it'll always feel secondary. What's a good example? Vegeta's lying in the dirt with a hole in his chest. This piece of shit has been a backstabbing, two-faced, untrustworthy bastard ever since he touched down on Earth. We know he's the Prince of all Saiyans. We know he has a pedigree. We know he doesn't like Frieza. And we know he'd never ask anyone for anything. So when we get the context that he's vengeful, that he hates Frieza for blowing up Planet Vegeta, and all of his own powerlessness collapses on top of him to show us a change we would have never expected from him, that context has weight and recontextualizes his character completely for us. He's still a punk ass, but he's nuanced, and we get to see that his pride has limits. He's humanized, and it sets a precedent for all the best Vegeta moments to come, to crank that shit to 13 and let the emotions rip. In contrast, Piccolo and Goku learning how to drive doesn't really contribute anything to either their characters or the plot. Because it's filler. Because it can't afford to. Because of content that isn't coasting along the mainstream causes characters' story to shift, it's worse than frustrating, it's confusing and pulls the audience out of their immersion. It's why I don't have much faith in the character stories. Rina's is charming, and it has a really good moment at the end to endear us to her specific flavor of care and professionalism. And I just don't like Ellen's because it just runs around in circles and shows us that she has friends and cares about them, but doesn't express it. There's all the room in the world to spin the filler like Kakashi's Anbu episodes in Shippuden, building the world out and characterizing both Kakashi and others by making us follow the person he used to be. And that's kinda what I'm hoping for Lighter's chapter, but my hopes aren't very high. This is a gacha game. We're all here for the characters. We want to spend time with the characters as we know them, and so we can only reliably get to know them on the path of the main story if we're going to get any developments at all. So I have to judge her as I see her. She's a sword for Nicole to swing around, and a bundle of chaos for Billy to wrangle and bounce off of. And if I had any one complaint with Astra and Evelyn existing, it's that they robbed Anby and Nicole of the knight and her princess dynamic. Again, I digress. I can't count on her relationship with the proxies to draw out her character either. Definitely not to the extent that I can with Nicole, Astra, and such. And that's mostly because when the hairs are involved, it's either Nicole or Billy who's at the helm. Anby sticks to quips and doesn't make requests or interjection of her own, and that lack of agency just keeps on holding her back. I know there's still more to come. I know there's a whole other unit's worth of context for her character, but when writing, you have to do your best to endear people to your characters even if their time in the spotlight comes so much later down the line. I almost don't care about her. If your audience keeps their hopes steady and you keep holding out on the payout, it makes the tension keep on ratcheting up. There will always be a point where the payout doesn't have a chance to satisfy you anymore, and you stave that off with nutrients. The feast will happen at this time, but until then, here's a snack, a treat, an IV drop, something. I promise I'm going to stop digressing. We get lots of alone time with Nicole between chapters because she and Wise are dating, don't at me. And we get lots of time with Billy directly stealing the show both in the Midnight Pursuit and Tour de Inferno. Speaking of the Midnight Pursuit, we do get a few new bits of characterization for Anby, but it isn't anything we haven't seen before. She goes into the ballet twins with her hand on the handle of her sword, while the other two pace and cower, but that composure and state of alertness are a stool for Rina to prop herself up on when she sneaks up on them. Again, she's a prop, doing layups for others, and you want me to wait until Season 1's epilogue to start actually getting bites of her character? You're crazy. And for the first and last time, liking burgers is not a personality trait. I want to talk about Rina again, and how she sets herself apart, standing out among the entire rest of the cast, not just her fellow maids, by withholding information from us. That's in part to her motif as a ghost, as something paranormal, something that doesn't belong. Rina commits herself to a more supporting role and keeps her past close to her chest, constantly teasing us with the infinite possibilities it could hold and characterizing herself with action, capability, reliability, and constant shows of admirable qualities. I say, withholding information makes a good mystery, but it's certainty that makes us connect with characters. Constant care for others, constant mention of her odd talents by others, her willingness to get down and dirty, the casual way she goes about every sort of encounter, her attention to the proxy and the task, and her connections to the greater conflict of ZZZ that's still hiding behind the scenes are all palpable characterization, because instead of making gaps, they raise questions. And not dumb questions with probably sappy answers like, why does Anby obsess over movies so much? The story wants as much about Anby to be a secret as possible. We can all tell that she's strong and has experience doing hollow work. She's talented and loyal and always on the ball, and she likes Nicole and hamburgers. I'm doing my best to not sound reductive, but if you keep on reeling and reeling that sweet bait in before I bite, then I'm not a fish that's going in your bucket. Others are going to lunge for it. They see a moving target and want to put some patience down for that sweet morsel you're taunting them with. But if you want meat, you've got to throw in a worm that's got a bit of meat on it. The opinion I have of Anby isn't complete, but it's informed by chapter upon chapter of time spent with her. The confidence from so many others that she's one of the best the game has to offer, and the game's insistence that I'm not allowed to know why just yet. Call me stuck up, but even if my opinion comes around, she's always going to be the hare who does the fighting and makes others look cool, the sword without an edge of her own. And if and when that changes, you'll hear it straight from me, coming to you all from the box in the middle of everything.